All right, there we go. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Susie Taylor. I'm with the Science Math Resource Center and the Montana Science Olympiad. Two of my colleagues are here as well. Dr. Fengzhen Lao is here and Asan Salam. I think once I start showing slides, I may not be able to see the chat, so hopefully my colleagues can kind of help with the chat and let us know if anybody has questions. We do have a pretty small group, so I think if you have a question at any time, you can just go ahead and either use the raise your hand icon or just, I'm going to actually mute some of our participants here for a sec. And then if you have a question at any time, you can go ahead and use the raise your hand or give a signal or type that in the chat. And we will also have time at the end for questions as well. So in just a second here, I will start sharing some slides. Hi, Matt, welcome. We are just getting started. And we are recording this presentation. So because we will be posting this on our website for other people to watch later, I just want to say we are recording this in November of 2021. So we will be talking about the upcoming season, which is 2021 through 22. Many of the same things will apply in future years, but if you should be happy to be watching this in a year that is not now, just be sure to look for all the updates for the year that we are in. So I am going to start sharing my screen here and we will get started. All right, can everybody see that slide okay? Getting started with Montana Science Olympiad? Okay, excellent. All right, well, welcome everybody. Today's presentation is about Science Olympiad, kind of specifically designed for new coaches. If you have some experience coaching, that's totally fine, or some other experience. But we're pretty much going to do the nuts and bolts of Science Olympiad so that you can find out what the tournament is like, what you might need to do as a coach to prepare. We'll talk some about tournament day, what that looks like, and then have just a few tips for you on starting a new team. Okay, let me get my slides going here. Apologies. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk about what is Science Olympiad, why you might want to do Science Olympiad. We'll share some of the benefits for you and for your students, and then we'll conclude with some tips for succeeding at Science Olympiad. You might hear us use a few acronyms today. So if we say SO, that means the Science Olympiad program in general. MTSO is Montana Science Olympiad. NSO is National Science Olympiad. And then to further confuse things, there's a brand new program at the national level called MySO, which is My Science Olympiad. It's an online program for students, and we will introduce that to you as well. Okay, so what is Science Olympiad? It is a national program, and in Montana, it's a rigorous statewide STEM competition, but it is also a fun competition. We hold a state tournament every year at MSU. That tournament has always traditionally been in November, right before Thanksgiving. However, COVID really messed things up last year. We ended up hosting a virtual tournament in April. And then this year, basically because there was so much uncertainty about COVID as well, we moved our state tournament to Friday, April 15th of 2022. We host 14 different events for middle schoolers and 14 different events for high schoolers. They cover a wide range of topics in science and engineering. And these events come in many different types. One type is knowledge, which is basically taking a test about a topic. A lab contest is very hands-on. You would actually be in, say, a chemistry lab at MSU doing experiments and taking measurements, that kind of thing. Some of the events are hybrid, a combination of test taking and being in a lab or doing hands-on activities. And then there are some building events where you might build something like a bridge or a catapult or some sort of machine Those are always done prior to the competition, and then you bring it to the tournament and test it against other people's devices. Also at MSU during the state tournament, we offer quite a few other things that students can do while you're here, including presentations by some of our faculty and staff and students. We have tours of labs and studios, different presentations that you can do. So in addition to the state tournament part, it's also just a really fun day for students to come to MSU and learn what it's like to be on campus. As I mentioned, COVID kind of messed with our scheduling, that's for sure, but it did open a couple of doors for new ways to compete to participate in Science Olympiad. One of those is MTSO, that is the national program. And basically every month they have a theme that ties to a topic that's typically used in Science Olympiad. On that theme, they will give lesson plans, activities, videos. This month is astronomy, November 2021, and they will actually have a speaker from NASA talking about astronomy. Then for students who are interested in actually competing against other students at the national level, they have at the end of the month what they call a STEM showdown. And any student can buy a ticket for that. It's $10. And then you can be in a national competition and actually win medals in that event. And of course, you can just do all these activities for fun. They're all free to download. And then last year, our state tournament in Montana was virtual. It was online in April. All the other states were doing virtual tournaments as well. And now many of those states are doing virtual invitational tournaments that anybody can participate in. So the state of California might run an invitational tournament in January, and you don't have to be in California to enter that tournament. You would just sign up here from Montana and your team can be part of that tournament. That's kind of a couple positives, I guess, of everything that was affected by COVID. So, as I mentioned, each year we offer 14 events in Division B, which is middle school, and 14 events in Division C, which is high school. Those events vary from year to year. So what you're seeing right now are the events that we have announced for this year, for the 2021-22 season. You can see that these events come in many different categories of science. There's life, personal, and social science. There's earth and space science, physical science and chemistry, technology and engineering, and the inquiry and nature of science. So no matter what type of topic your students may be interested in, there's going to be an event that they will like. Here's a little more nuts and bolts about how the teams work. So we offer Division B middle school, which is grades 6 through 9, then Division C high school, which is grades 9 through 12. You can see that there's an overlap there with ninth graders, and that kind of depends on where you're teaching and how your school is set up. A student cannot be on a Division B and a Division C team at the same time, and we can give some more details about those rules if you need it. So one thing that you're going to want to note, especially if you're brand new to Science Olympiad, at the national level, they offer 23 events for middle school and 23 events for high school. We just don't have the capacity in Montana to host all of those events. So when you look on the national website and you see an event that students might be interested in, you're going to double check that we're offering that event in Montana and make sure your students aren't preparing for an event that we don't actually host at our state tournament. Science Olympiad team has a maximum of 15 students and 2 alternates. So all those students can come to the state tournament at MSU. Of course, you can have a smaller team as well. In fact, we offer a special trophy for the small schools division. So if you come from a very small school and just can't get 15 students on a team, that's fine. Or even if you're at a big school and have a smaller team, that's fine too. Schools can have a varsity and a junior varsity team, which means you may be bringing more than 30 students total from your school participating on 2 different teams. When your students are doing these events, like the bridge building event, they're very often for 2 people and sometimes even for 3. A student can compete by themselves, but there are not any events where they're only for one person. So we really encourage students to work with a partner. It's just more fun and kind of divides up the work. Um, Most students do 2 to 4 events, but it's fine to do one event. You really can't squeeze in more than 4 events. It's just that the time schedule does not permit that, and we'll take a look at that in just a little bit too. Here's a little bit about the timeline. So like I said, we always used to do the tournament in November. COVID really messed with that. So this year's tournament in 2022 will be in April. We've already announced the events and we've opened registration. You basically have until March 14th of 2022 to officially register your team. Although if you're planning to participate in our state tournament or any other Science Olympiad activities, we encourage you to go ahead and register your team. The payments are not actually due until April. So you could register your team now. That actually helps us know how many teams are planning to participate. And then you could pay now or anytime between now and April. We do offer t-shirts, and those you don't have to order until springtime either. We will ask students to sign a code of conduct form. And then we've always typically had a STEM night at the Museum of the Rockies on the evening before the competition. We are still waiting to hear back from the museum on whether we can do that or not. But it's a really fun addition to the tournament for those, especially for those teams who are either really close and can come and then go home that night, or for teams from far away and actually are spending the night before. And then the national tournament is hosted this year by Caltech on May 14th, 2022. That will be a virtual tournament. So the winners of the Montana State Tournament are invited to that national tournament. So a middle school team is invited, the Montana State Champions, and the high school team is invited, the high school state champions. 2022 hosted by Caltech. 2023 will be in Wichita, Kansas. So here's a little bit about why you might want to consider doing a Science Olympiad team, especially if you've never done it yourself as a competitor or a volunteer. I want to share a little bit about why this is a really cool competition for students. So basically, students are studying at a pretty high level to understand these topics. They can pull from a variety of resources, including college level textbooks, websites, there's lots of videos and other resources online, but basically they're becoming experts in the event area that they've chosen. There's a lot of researching and writing and teamwork, and it really is impressive for students to have Science Olympiad on their resume or their college applications. There are many people high level in industry and the National Science Foundation who were Science Olympians, and they recognize what hard work it goes into being on a Science Olympiad team. So a little bit more about Science Olympiad. So it's a great opportunity for STEM students, but it's also a great opportunity for non-STEM students. A lot of the contests have many aspects of them that are really appealing to a lot of students. Because it's a team, you're getting to spend time with other peers. It's an opportunity to just really feel like you're part of a team and supporting your school. Science Olympiad can also be a nice complement to the classroom activities. If some of you are science teachers, you can really use the material that you're doing in class to kind of work with your Science Olympiad team as well. As I mentioned, it's teamwork. So basically, it's like a track meet where, say, somebody at a track meet, if a student gets a gold medal in hurdles, those points go toward the team score for the entire team. So in Science Olympiad, if a student scores well in astronomy, for instance, those points go toward the team score, and then all those individual events added up together is what helps us figure out who's the top team at the competition. It really is an entire community event, students, parents, community members, and coaches all working together to support the team. As I mentioned before, it's not just for science kids. A lot of the events require writing, research, vocabulary, there's building, there's problem solving. There's opportunities for students to lead and mentor other students. So when you're recruiting for your team, don't just think of those kids who are super duper into science, because there might be a lot of other kids out there who would enjoy this too. So now I want to share a couple tips for succeeding at Science Olympiad. Actually, let me pause for just a second. I can't see the chat, but hopefully my colleagues will let me know if we had any questions come in on the chat.
One question, but I already responded. Mr. Cooper asked if we can share if our slides are available. I say yes.
Yes, absolutely. We're recording the presentation and we can share the slides as well, because there's some pretty good tips that are coming up here too. I think those will be handy. So here's some tips for coaches on starting your team. So like I said several times now, we typically have a very short season, kind of September through November. So coaches have to work really quickly. This year, you have a lot more time to build your team. Although I would say if you're building a team, I would start doing it now. There's a lot of ways you can advertise at your school, through other teachers. Many coaches have an informational meeting to invite people in and see who's interested. In some schools that have been doing this for quite a while, they have many more students than 15 who want to be on the Science Olympiad team. So they actually have tryouts. Sometimes, you might have to wait until you're a little bit older student to be on the team. Or you can consider having two teams, a varsity and a JV. Here are another couple tips about how to choose which events you're going to do. So like I mentioned, we offer 14 events. You can compete in all of those events, but you certainly don't have to. I will say the teams that are vying for that top tournament or top trophy, the ones who want to go on to nationals, they will be competing in all 14 events, and they will be preparing for all 14 events. However, we've had teams that come and just do maybe 3 events. Like I said, coming to MSU and just being around all the other students, getting to visit those labs and classrooms is really fun. So it is totally fine to just start early and just do a few events. On that second bullet, this is really good advice for you as a coach. Are you trying to be super competitive? Are you just trying to have fun? You can kind of think about that as you pick your team and think about your practices. That third bullet, pick events with the easiest preparation the first year. So as I mentioned early on, there are different types of events. Some are simply a pencil and paper test, and those are the easiest to prepare for because you don't need any special equipment. Whereas something like building a bridge or a catapult, that's really cool and students love those events, but it may take a little bit more logistics and support and tools to participate in those events. And again, as I mentioned before, students can participate in up to about 4 events. That's pretty much all the schedule will allow for. But if it's your first year, they may just want to compete in one or two. A couple tips here about the rules manuals. Here we go. This is a printed copy of this year's rules manual. These are free to download from the National Science Olympiad site, and they're quite detailed. You really gonna want to spend some time with this rule book. In just a moment, I'll show you kind of what those rules look like, but you're gonna help your students really look through what their event is like, to know how it is scored, what materials they need to bring, and how they can be prepared for that event. This is an example out of the rule book. This is a popular contest called Crime Busters. The students are actually solving a crime, and this is one of those where they're doing some hands-on lab work. So they're actually getting samples and analyzing them, and then trying to put that all together to figure out who done it. So what I want to point out here is a couple things. So you'll see on every event rules page, it'll tell you how many students can participate. It's usually 2, but occasionally 3. It will show you, especially if you need eye protection, there's actually a chart in the back of the rule book that tells which type of eye protection those students need to have. There's different types depending on whether it's a build event where you might get hit with something versus a chem lab where there could be fumes. So you want to be really careful and pay attention to the safety aspects. Um, it will also show you what the students can bring to each event, and it will vary by every event. So for some, you might be able to bring an entire binder of reference materials. And part of what students do as they prepare during the year is build this binder. So they can put reference sheets and handouts that they find on the internet. They can put all kinds of things in that binder. But in some contests, you can only bring one sheet of paper. So you're going to want to be really strategic about what's on that sheet of paper. Sometimes it's a two-sided sheet of paper. So really important that you study the event parameters and know what you can bring with you. And you're going to want to maximize, if you can bring an entire binder, put a lot of stuff in that binder. If you have one sheet, one side, put as much as you can on that one sheet, one side. And then here's just one more. I'm circling specifically here for crime busters. There's some very specific information about safety. Safety is so, so important that the judges are going to look to make sure, just like you're a scientist in a lab, you're expecting the students to be following these rules as well. And if a student, say, doesn't have appropriate eye protection or hasn't done what they need to do to take care of their hair so it's out of the way, they could be disqualified from the event, or they may be sent out to go get the safety equipment they need. And meanwhile, the clock is ticking, they will have less time to finish that event. So really careful that you study these rules manuals. I do want to say too, because some events are hosted every year or every other year, you may come across an older rules manual, but don't use it. Be sure to use this year's rules manual, and that would be the 2021-22 rules manual, unless you are watching a recording of this in the future, in which case you should download the rules for this year. A little bit more on the rules and events. Some of the events can be pretty rigorous. One thing, especially at the high school level, our judges who are making these events want to make sure there's not a tie. If they make a test that has 10 questions and they're all really easy and everybody gets them all right, it's really hard to know who got first, second, and third place. So they're going to make them deliberately kind of difficult. And you want to prepare your students for that. You don't want them to get discouraged that they couldn't finish the entire test because they ran out of time. But on that note, you do want to teach them how to keep track of time. Nearly all of the events that are test or lab are 50 minutes. So your students can actually practice doing 50 minutes events while they're preparing for Science Olympiad and thinking about how they're going to keep track of time. Sometimes the judge will announce whether there's a tiebreaker question, and your students are really going to want to pay attention. Okay, I really want to spend some extra time on this one because it's the tiebreaker. It's really important. And then I just want to put a plug in here too. Our event supervisors are volunteers. Often they're MSU faculty or grad students. Sometimes they're members of the community. And they truly are volunteering their time to make these contests special for the students. So we tell all of our Science Olympians just to be respectful of the judges. Don't look for, excuse me, weird loopholes in the rules to try to trick them. They're here to support the contest, and we sure do appreciate that. Now, here's a couple more tips for coaches about kind of getting prepared for Science Olympiad. So as I mentioned before, you're going to kind of think about how many events do we want to compete in? Do we want to be super competitive in just a couple of events? Or do we want to try to do all the events and we don't really care how well we do? That's something you're going to want to think about. And just know that some of these, especially the building ones, they might take quite a while to prepare. So you don't want to run short of time. You don't want to be on April 13th and you don't feel quite ready. Many coaches hold regular practices, just like a sports team would, and you want to keep those meetings fun and engaging. And it's really awesome to get volunteers to come in and help your team. For instance, this year we are running rocks and minerals for both middle school and high school. If you have a parent who's super into geology or somebody in your community who collects rocks, you should invite them in and help work with your students. Here's a little bit more tips for preparing your team. It's not all about the science skills, especially when students are working in a pair. They might want to actually practice, what happens if you disagree about an answer? Is one person the leader and one person is second, or are they working totally in parallel? What if the day of the tournament comes and somebody is sick? Do you have somebody who can step in as an alternate, or will they go it on their own? You really want to practice following instructions. Unfortunately, sometimes people will miss a question because they just didn't pay attention. Oh, I was supposed to write this type of
sale. To make that extra hour, please count with free sheets and pillows.
I'm going to see if I can put mute here for a sec. Okay, because students are working in a pair, you're going to help them think about, again, what if you disagree with your partner? Is there a way that you can work that out together? And you are going to want to set some deadlines so students don't say, oh, this contest isn't until April. I don't have to start building my binder until March. You can start now and really start preparing for the tournament. A couple more ways to get support for you as a coach. Definitely talk to somebody who has Science Olympiad experience, and we can help you connect with some other people. Our staff is here to help you. The national website is really excellent. You might find other people in your school or community who did Science Olympiad at another school. It's great to have support from your school administrator. And we actually have a letter on our website that you can download and give to your school administrators if they don't really understand Science Olympiad, but you want to get their support. And then there are some costs associated, especially if you're far from MSU and travel is an issue. I know somebody had a question about costs, so we will be sure to address that too, what to expect. But you might want to think about fundraising sooner rather than later. Here are some resources that will be of interest to you. The National Science Olympiad website has so many resources on it. I mean, it's almost an overwhelming number of resources. There are videos, there are past tests, there are links. They do offer national workshops for coaches. Some of those are free, some of those are paid. In fact, coming up this weekend, the Illinois Science Olympiad is putting on a virtual coaches workshop. I think it's $25 and operates on Friday night and Saturday, which is pretty cool. There's a Science Olympiad store that has resources you can buy. Some of these are downloadable kind of study guides that are about $10 or so. And then Ward's Science Store has kits. I have not had a lot of experience personally with the kits to know whether they're worth the money or not. But if you do want to purchase some, there's a discount code in the rules manual. I think it's on the inside cover. You can get, I think it's 12 or 15% off if you use that discount code and decide to order some of those kits. But you don't have to have those kits to compete in Science Olympiad. These are some tips. I'm going to go through these pretty fast because I know we're at 4:30 here. But these are from Mike Mangold at Fergus High School. He's been a coach for a long time. They've had a winning record. They've gone to nationals. And he's saying they start practices 2 nights a week, leading 6 weeks before the competition. He's leaving it up to students to schedule more time. Maybe they're practicing outside of school or meeting with their partner. He's also suggesting to involve community members and mentors and choose a wide-ranging suite of events so that every student on your team will find something that they're interested in. Mike also said, let's see, we have mentors from the community in all these different areas. And not only does that help the students and take some pressure off you as a coach, but it's actually really fun for community members to get to work with high school and middle school students. They find it a lot of fun. At the state tournament level, Mike is saying you really need to be well-rounded. So if students are competing in 2, 3, 4 events, they have to be prepared for all those events. Maybe they want to go all in on their specialty area, but just know that they then may suffer if they're competing in several different events. Here's a little bit more advice for new coaches. We've kind of gone over some of this, but it can be a little bit overwhelming to get started, and it is okay to start small. You really don't have to do all these events. You don't have to have a giant team. And because you're listening to this presentation in November of 2021, and our tournament is not until April of 2022, you have quite a bit of time to really think this through and build a team. And really, that state tournament is a lot of fun. I would say, I've only been to one live tournament myself before COVID, but a lot of the teams were there not trying to win that trophy, not trying to win the medals. They were just there because it's cool. It's fun to be on campus. It's fun to be with all those other kids, and it's fun to test your skills. But it's okay if you're not trying to be super competitive. This is a little bit of advice from John Graves. Some of you may know John. He has quite a presence in Montana with the Montana Science Teachers Association. He is our arbitrator for Science Olympiad, which means that he helps us out on tournament day in case there are any questions about the rules. These often come in the building events because they're very precise. You may have to send a vehicle a certain number of centimeters, and sometimes there can be disagreements about how that is measured. So John is here and on site. These are pretty rare when anybody has a question about this, but do know that if there is a question about the rules, John is here and can help work that out. So registering for Montana Science Olympiad, the coach registers the team online through our website, and we'll give you that website at the end. Like I mentioned, you can register now and not pay until spring. You can pay online with a credit card, or we can send you an invoice. And then later, this will be at least after the start of the year, we use a tournament software called Olympiad, and we will send you information about how to get your team and all the team members into that tournament software. And then again, as I mentioned before, every student signs a code of conduct, basically just saying that they will follow the rules, they will be good sports, and be a good competitor. This is a look at our website. And again, I'll give you the address toward the end. But there's a lot of information here. The school coaches and teams is really important for you as coaches. This is how you can get links to register and find out information about the tournament. I'm going to pause here one more time before we go into competition day, see if anybody has questions or anything. Fengchen, are we good for?
Just one question about one is about how many kids in the Science Olympiad. I said, or in pandemic years is like 1,400. And I think one Mr. Matt might I don't know, Matt, are you from a small school? Because he addressed if the kids miss one event, like how we score that event. I said 0 for that particular event, but we have award for each event. So even even kids miss particular event, they can still get their performance will be still counted for the event they compete. Yeah, it's just there is some kind of disadvantage when we count the overall score. Difficult to get the top 3, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Fengchen. So basically, there's not a penalty for not participating in an event, but you also don't have the opportunity to get team points in that event. So again, just like a track meet, if you don't have somebody running the 800, you're not going to get any points in that toward your team score. But if you have a team of maybe only 8 kids and they've selected 5 events that they're going to compete in, and they really want to buckle down and do well on those events, that's great for them. They can actually earn gold, silver, and bronze medals in those events, which is pretty cool. So on competition day, that'll be April 15th, 2022. That's quite a long ways off. So some of this maybe won't register quite at the moment, but we encourage you to arrive early. If you live far away, quite a few of our teams come and spend the night before. I'll tell you, that is no picnic. Trying to find housing in Bozeman, it's just gotten very expensive. So if you know you're coming ahead of time, you might want to start looking into that ahead of time for sure. We will put out a map. There are events all over campus, so students are kind of floating around from place to place, and there's not a lot of time in between the events. So we will put out that schedule and the map ahead of time, and you can work with your students so they know, okay, I'm in this building at 8:30, but then I have to be in this building at 9:30, so here's my path. And then when you get on the bus or in the cars, you just want to make sure that you have all your safety stuff, all these great binders or one-pagers that you've been working on, everything that you need for the competition. We do have a bookstore here on campus where you can buy some last-minute things. Like if you need lab goggles, you can buy those, but you definitely want to have everything with you if you can. This is a sample of what the schedule looks like. This was the tournament in November 2019, and I'm using this just as a sample. This may not be exactly what our tournament schedule is like in April 2022, but I wanted to share it with you. We basically start at 7:45 a.m. with an opening ceremony. We have over 1,000 students, so we ask people to be there by 7:30. People are coming as early as 7 to check in their team. If we are able to have that STEM night at the Museum of the Rockies the night before, and you come to that, you can also check your team in there, which saves you a little bit of time. You can see on the schedule 8:10 impound. So what impound means for the building competitions, this year we have a couple that involve a catapult. So basically, we don't want students to see the other students' devices and then steal their ideas and go do it on their own. So at the start of the day, everybody has to bring their built items, and they go into quarantine basically so that other teams can't see what other people have built and take those ideas. Then at our last live tournament, we ran competitive events from 8:30 to 12:30. We'll probably be doing something pretty similar to that. There's a short break when you can have lunch. From 1 to 2, we do these talks and tours where you can sign up your group to go visit a cool lab or hear about some interesting research. You can also use that time to tour campus, visit the duck pond, go to the bookstore. And then from 2:30 to 4 is when we do our awards ceremony. It's always a lot of fun. We give away the medals for each of the individual events in middle school and high school. We give away the team trophies. And we always have lots of prizes for the students who are part of that ceremony. Then again, this is a sample, but I wanted to point out a couple things to you. We have different 1-hour blocks for the contest. I'll get to the build events in just a second, but for those that are pencil and paper or a lab test, those are typically 50 minutes, but it means if your kids have back-to-back contests, they're going to be a quick transition time from one to the other. So each team is given a team number, and I'm just going to use this very first square. If you see anatomy and physiology, 8:30 a.m., it shows the 8:30 a.m. slot is for teams 130 through 143. So say your team has been given number 130, you would see that at 8:30 a.m., they're competing in anatomy and physiology. I'm just going down the list here. Actually, Team 130 does not have a lot of events in that first slot, but as we move across the day, you'll see Team 130 has quite a few different events at 9:30 and so on. For building events, typically you sign up for a slot. So when you impound your device, you might also come in and say, okay, we're going to test our catapult at 9:20, and then maybe the next team is at 9:30, 9:40. So your students are going to want to look if they're in a knowledge test from 9:30 to 10:30, They'll just want to make sure they don't sign up to test their catapult during that time period. Sorry, that was kind of a lot about the schedule, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of this too. I think we're getting to the home stretch here. On competition day, many people bring a cart or a wagon for some of their large items. You might have an entire box of safety goggles, or maybe you have a big device that students have built. You do want to check the schedule for these impound events. If your device is supposed to be an impound, but you're still working on it on the bus, and it's not there in time, it won't be allowed to compete. A few of the events allow spectators, like typically the building events or flying events, but most of the knowledge tests or the lab tests do not allow any spectators, including coaches. So here's a couple other Science Olympiad opportunities. This is kind of beyond the state tournament. These are some ways that you can get your team ready or just be part of Science Olympiad. I had mentioned early on the MTSO. This is a national program. They have a new theme every month. They have lesson plans, videos, challenges, and the national contest. You can do that. That could be the only thing you do. It would actually be really fun for your students to kind of get a feel for what Science Olympiad is like. On the national website, you're also going to learn about a lot of national contests and challenges that are not necessarily Science Olympiad, but are kind of related in topic. For instance, I just found on the website yesterday, the National Free Flight Society has a rubber band airplane contest. So that's something your students might want to compete in, and it could actually help give them some tips for a Science Olympiad event too. I wanted to mention the 3 C's: citizenship and character in the community. Many schools that have been doing Science Olympiad for a long time really build their team into a group of young people who are doing great things in their community. They might actually go out and do a service project on behalf of their Science Olympiad team, or do something else in the school. They're really showing off, this is a cool group of kids and we are a team, and we're out there helping our school and community. NGSS alignment. This is also on the National Science Olympiad website. Many of the activities are mapped to NGSS, which is kind of cool if you're going to try to work that into your classroom material. They do have lots of workshops and resources for teachers. Most of those are free. There are scholarship programs for students who have competed in Science Olympiad. In fact, we have one of those national scholarship winners here at Montana State, which is really cool. The national website has so much stuff. I've actually thought it would be fun for you as a coach to challenge your students to find everything that's on that website. Maybe you could do a scavenger hunt, or, kind of divide and conquer. Different people look at different sections and then come back and report what they find. And that website is soinc.org. Here, this is a snapshot of that national website. And the reason I have the red arrow, I did not realize all the amazing, crazy, good stuff is up there in that tiny menu button. So you can see these boxes here. There's quite a few things. And in fact, right at the very top is how you download the rules. But if you really want to get into the meat of the stuff, click that menu button and you will see dozens of different categories. That's where you find a lot of these good resources. So we're almost in the home stretch here. These are some final ideas for new coaches. As I mentioned several times, this MySO program is really cool. It's a nice way to kind of get a light entry into Science Olympiad and see what that's like. Be sure you have this year's rules manual. Remember that we only host 14 of those 23 events. So if you download this rule manual and you see, oh my gosh, ping pong parachute, that sounds cool. We're not actually doing ping pong parachute in Montana. So you can do it for fun if you want, but we won't have a competition for that. So just make really sure that you know which events we're doing. Again, if you're just getting started, you might just want to do a few events with a few kids. That is totally okay. We have a letter of support if you need it. Here, join this year's competition as a volunteer. If you're not quite sure you want to be a coach or don't know quite what that would be like to put a team together, you could come volunteer with us this year and really get a feel for what Science Olympiad is like. And then I've got a few resources at the bottom there. We have a Facebook page where we share updates. We have a newsletter that comes out about twice a month. The National Science Olympiad is also on social media, and they have a nice newsletter that you can sign up for. I think that is it. So Fangshan and Asan are here with me. I'm Susie. These are our emails. You can find us at montana.edu/SMRC for Science Math Resource Center, and then MTSO for Montana Science Olympiad. But if you just Google Montana Science Olympiad, we are the first one that shows up, and hopefully you can find us okay. I am going to stop sharing, and you are welcome to ask any questions in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and ask any questions that you may have.
I don't know how to answer this question. Matt just sent one question, said if they can send the photos and projects to us to do a preview. I guess, you know, kind of a little bit challenging for this. First, you know, it's like as an SF project director say, could you review my proposal? They usually will say, oh, we don't judge your project because we are not, we are not even, evaluator panel. We are not in the panel to review your project. So I just wonder, for this kind of question, should we like connect with event supervisor, like do a screen review, or?
Yeah, this is one I would probably need to ask the national office if this is okay. A lot of the compliance can come down to measuring, so it might be hard for someone to actually measure that with a photo, but I can check on that, and we'll let everybody know. What's important for us is that we don't give an unfair advantage to one team over another. But on the other hand, there are so many resources out there, and if you're not taking advantage of all those resources, you kind of left some cards on the table. So yeah, we'll check that out. And Matt, hang on to our email so we can correspond and see what's possible there.
Yeah, I just had some kids that were already building some stuff, and they've had a lot of questions about rules, and some of the terms are a bit confusing, especially with like the mousetrap car. I had like 6 or 7 boys who are all working on this mousetrap car, and they're like, "What does this mean? If it overhangs the base by 1 centimeter, then it's disqualified." And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, Cooper, I wonder if maybe I could call on you. Cooper has, in addition to being a potential coach, he has also been an event supervisor, and I think that might have been the event that you supervised. Do you know the answer to the question about can we help teams ahead of time with that kind of stuff? And then maybe if there's any specific questions about mousetrap vehicle.
I never found anything that said you couldn't try and contact people. I believe I got a couple questions kind of like that of, what does this actually mean type rules interpretation. And I don't see why anyone wouldn't, answer those type of questions, because really we want the kids to do well.
Yeah.
I don't remember that rule from previous years. They change it a little bit every year, obviously, to keep things fresh.
Yeah, but Matt, let's stay in touch on that one. Yeah, we'll see if we can help your kids out. We don't want them to be confused, and especially don't go down a wrong direction, if they don't quite understand how that goes. I will say too, if we get a question from a coach that seems like something everybody would want to know, we'll post that on our website, and we try to send that in an email to all the registered coaches, which is why it's really great to be registered. If you plan to participate, you should definitely register, even if you don't pay until spring. That way we know who to contact with new info like that.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Is there a limit to the number of students per team? You may have said that, and I'm sorry if you did.
Yeah, there's a max of 15 students per team, and you can also have 2 alternates.
Okay.
Yeah, so, if you kind of do the math of 14 events, working in pairs, sometimes triples, your students will need to do several events if you're going to have a full team and do all the events. But you don't have to have 15 and you don't have to do all the events, but that's the max.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can also have a varsity team and a JV team. So if you do have a lot of students, you might consider bringing 2 teams.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Alrighty, well, we'll probably wrap up here. We will send the slides and the recording to everybody. That'll have our emails and everything. So if you're thinking about something tonight and you want to circle back and ask a question, feel free to do that. We will continue just sending updates to everybody as the season goes on. This is new for us to have such a long season. Usually we just have September through November. Now we have fall until April. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you have some kids who would like to put a team together, and we hope to see you at MSU in April. All right. Thank you everybody for being here.
No, thank you. Thanks for hosting this.
All right. See ya. I'm going to stop recording.